Yep.
All right. Hello and welcome to Learning the Law, podcast about all things legal with a focus on current events, where we try to teach you things in 1 hour. My name is Ashley, aka Phoenix Nymphy, and my co-host, the husband who is still on bed rest, and the man of the hour, Ron. This podcast is purely educational and should not be taken as legal advice. This podcast is based on our interpretation, mostly his because he's the lawyer, of relevant law. And any opinions expressed are the opinions of the individual or individuals making them and do not reflect the opinions of any firm, company, or other individuals. Ron is a licensed attorney, practicing attorney in the state of California.
Yes, I am.
So
and have been since September 15th, 1999.
Oh my God. So
I always get that in there.
You're killing me, Ron. You're killing me. So this month is Women's History Month, and I wanted to do a podcast about women lawmakers and the history. There's so much. There's not enough, but there's a lot out there. And so I wanted to actually talk about those awesome ladies in politics. We have a lot, actually. There's a lot. A lot of the information that I've got is coming from like Rutgers, coming from obviously Wiki, various, like there are so many sites, womenshistory.org, all kinds of like really just awesome sites out there. But one of the things I wanted to note in this podcast is on my channel, on my stream on twitch.tv/Phoenix Nymphy, which is where we host the podcast live. I am raising money for RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. So if you want to kind of help donate to that, I will link the Tiltify. I'll link the Tiltify link in the podcast descriptions and stuff like that. We don't get any of that money. I don't touch any of that money. It goes straight to the charity, which is a really awesome thing that Tiltify provides. So I don't touch any of that stuff. Since it is Women's History Month, women are disproportionately victims of sexual assault and sexual violence. And it is definitely a really bad problem. I saw something that said, we kind of passively, when we say violence against women, we kind of take the perpetrators out of it, and don't talk about the people who actually cause this violence against women. And it's men. Men are the ones who cause the violence against women, and men are also the ones who cause the violence against men as well. They are disproportionately, I know I've said that word twice, but they are 99% the abusers. That's not saying that women can't be abusers and non-binary can't be abusers at all. This is just saying that, when I walk on the street alone and I see a man, I'm going to try to keep myself safe more than I am if I see another woman. It's a pretty big problem. So if you, in light of Women's History Month, if you want to help out a really great cause, we'll link it in all the descriptions and stuff. Everyone is affected. Some just quick statistics: every 73 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. 1 out of every 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. I'm one of them, so now you actually know someone. About 3% of American men, or 1 in 33, have experienced an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. And the problem with that statistic is we don't know how accurate it is because, one, even women don't come forward enough about their assaults. And two, men, it's so stigmatized that men can't be raped, but they absolutely can. Men can absolutely be sexually assaulted. And there's this awful stigma surrounding it that, you're not a man if you let that happen. And that's not how that works. So men are just as fixing this problem will fix it for everyone. Helping this problem will help with everyone who has to deal with this problem. From 2009 to 2013, Child Protective Services agencies substantiated or found strong evidence to indicate that 63,000 children a year were victims of sexual abuse. And these statistics are coming straight off of rainn.org. That's rainn.org. And a majority of child victims are 12 to 17 of victims under the age of 18. 34% of victims of sexual assault and rape are under age 12, and 66% of victims of sexual assault and rape are age 12 to 17. 90% female and 10% male. 17.7 million American women as of 1998. So 9 out of every 10 victims of rape or sexual assault are female. This is why it's kind of important to me to talk about. And most of the time it's people that we know. It's not strangers. Most of the time it's people we know. And I can tell you that of my close friends, every single one of my close girlfriends has dealt with it. So it's definitely a problem that needs to be fixed. And it's something that's very important to me. And rainn does amazing stuff. They have a hotline for people who are dealing with stuff. They will help rehouse you, help rehome you, help you find, help you get assistance, whatever that assistance needs. And the rate of domestic abuse has gone up so much because of COVID. So in 2020, these stats are just awful. They're awful right now. So thank you for listening to that. But let's get into this week's discussion. We're celebrating women lawmakers this time around. And if we have time, we will go into what it actually means to pass a law and how you pass a law. We may not have enough because I really want to celebrate these ladies of politics. So, and all of these things, all the stuff that I have are in the notes. So you'll be able to see those when I upload them on the website later, where I'm getting like all of my references and stuff from. But let's just start out.
Okay.
In 1848, the first women's rights convention in the U.S. took place in Seneca Falls, New York, convened by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, and others active in the anti-slavery movement. And it resulted in a declaration of sentiments modeled on the Declaration of Independence. The declaration demanded a variety of rights for women, including suffrage. I find that really cool that it was women who were also anti-slavery in the anti-slavery movement. That right there, I actually didn't know.
Some people may not know what suffrage means.
Would you like to explain? Because I'm probably going to do a lot of the talking today.
Right. Suffrage is basically the right to vote.
My question is, why is it called suffrage, though? Like, that just doesn't make sense because suffering, what? Like, it doesn't, why is it suffrage?
That's a good question. I do not know.
We'll have to find that out then. We'll have to find out the root word of suffrage and why we call it suffrage. Um, in 1860, and this was all before we ever even got the right to vote. So this is all the stuff so far that has happened before we even get the right to vote. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton, which so many people know that name. She was a massive force in getting women the right to vote. She was the first woman to run for the U.S. House of Representatives, even though she was not eligible to vote. And she ran as an independent from New York State, receiving 24 votes of 12,000 that were cast. That means 24 dudes voted for her. 24 men actually voted for her. So that's kind of a big deal. In 1872, Victoria Woodhull, a stockbroker, publisher, and protege of Cornelius Vanderbilt, ran for president of the United States on the Equal Rights Party ticket. In 1884, Belva Lockwood, the first woman admitted to practice law before the U.S. Supreme Court, ran for president on the Equal Rights Party ticket. And she did so again in 1888. So do you know much about Belva Lockwood?
I do not.
I'm surprised you don't, considering she's the first woman admitted to practice law.
You don't learn in law school a lot about individual lawyers. You do learn about some individual Supreme Court justices.
Well, I'm going to read y'all just a little bit about her from Wiki. She graduated from law school in DC and became one of the first female lawyers in the United States. In 1879, she successfully petitioned Congress to be allowed to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court and becoming the first woman attorney given this privilege. She ran for president in 1884 and 1888. And was the first woman to appear on official ballots. While she's commonly cited as the first woman to run for president, she was not old enough to run, unlike Lockwood. While Victoria Woodhull is commonly cited as the first woman to run for president,
That's who I thought it was.
She's not actually old enough to run, unlike Lockwood. So she ran for it, but it wasn't an official ballot, apparently. So she
How old was she? Do you know? I mean,
she was born October 24th, 1830, and died May 19th, 1917. So when she did run for president in 1884, she was 50 something, 54.
Yeah, that's old enough to run.
Yeah, that's Belva Lockwood. And that's pretty cool. A lot of these ladies, it seems, are from New York.
Throw in a little bit of law here. The requirement to run for president is 35.
What? Why is there why can't a 19-year-old run for president? Why is it just because they think with age comes wisdom?
Correct.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. That's why we got so many old people in office. But it seems to me like with age comes corruption.
Well, the longer you live, the easier it is to be corrupted. You get more chances and opportunities.
Just saying. So in 1877, by the way, there's going to be a quiz after this, so you better remember all these dates. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to actually post this in the Twitch Twitch so that people can follow along if they want. In 1877, Susanna Salter was elected mayor of Argonia, Kansas, and she was the first woman mayor in the whole country, which is huge. And these are all women who did all of this stuff. I mean, she was officially a mayor in the country before she could even vote. Didn't even have the right to vote, but she is now holding an office. In 1888, Oskaloosa, Kansas became the first town, which I found this absolutely fascinating, in the U.S. known to have an all-woman government, with the mayor and entire council being female. The council included Mayor Mary D. Lohman and council members Carrie Johnson, Sadie E. Balsley, I think is how you say it, Hannah P. Morris, Emma K. Hamilton, and Mittie Josephine Golden. 1 year prior, in 1887, voters in Syracuse, Kansas, elected women to all 5 seats of the city council, but a man served as mayor. That is insane. That means that men put these women in these places of power. Men voted for these women because women did not have the vote. So my question is, what changed? Why are men so against women now? But anyway, I digress. In 1892, Laura Eisenhuth, I'm not sure how to say that, was elected superintendent of public instruction, the first woman elected to a statewide executive office in any state. So we go from, in just a few years, women go from the first mayor of in a city to a first statewide position. In 1894, the first 3 women elected to a state legislature in the country were Clara Cressingham, Carrie C. Hawley, and Frances Clock, all in the Colorado House of Representatives. In 1896, Martha Hughes Cannon was elected to the Utah State Senate, becoming the first woman state senator in the country. In 1900, Frances Warren of Wyoming became the first woman delegate to a Republican National Convention. In the same year, Elizabeth Cohen of Utah was chosen as an alternate to the Democratic National Convention when another delegate became ill. Cohen became the first woman delegate to a Democratic National Convention. So,
and that was Utah?
Utah, and yeah, that was Utah. Which is, Utah was the Democratic National Convention and Wyoming was the Republican National Convention. And now I want it noted that Republican in the 1890s is not what Republican is now.
Same with Democrat.
Yeah, they were kind of flopped. The Republicans were more progressive back then. The Republican Party was more progressive back then.
I do believe that women have always had the right to vote in Wyoming.
In 1869, a U.S. territory in Wyoming. Okay. U.S. territory in 1869, Wyoming's first territorial legislature voted to give women the right to vote and to hold public office. A legislature made entirely of men passed a woman's suffrage bill in 1869. So yeah, women had the right to vote in Wyoming as a territory before it even became a state. It didn't become a state until 1890. So it became the first U.S. state allowing women citizens to vote. Which is pretty wild. That's pretty cool, actually. So in 1916, now this name is going to be one that most people know, Jeannette Rankin. So Jeannette Rankin is a Republican from Montana, and she became the first woman ever elected to Congress. She served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1917 to 1919, and again from 1941 to 1942. And I wanted to kind of speak on her specifically because she is the woman who actually introduced legislation that eventually became the 19th Amendment. She is the one, her full name is Jeanette Pickering Rankin, which is what most people know her by. She actually opposed both world wars and was the only member of Congress to vote against World War II because she was a pacifist. And she still remains the only woman ever elected to Congress from Montana. Kind of sad, actually. That fact is a little sad.
Throwing this out, the 19th Amendment is the amendment that gave women the right to vote.
Yes. So 4 years later, the 19th Amendment in 1920 was ratified in the Constitution, giving women the right to vote. So 72 years of pushing for that is when they finally had the right to vote. And the League of Women Voters was founded by members of the National American Women's Suffrage Association as a means of encouraging informed participation by the new female electorate. So we finally get the right to vote in 1920, only because of all of these women who worked before that to get us there. In 1922, you have Rebecca Latimer Felton, who was a Georgia Democrat, became the first woman appointed to the Senate, but she only served one day. Florence Ellenwood Allen was elected Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio, the first woman elected to the highest court in any state. She had previously been the first woman assistant county prosecutor in the country and the first woman elected to a judicial office in Ohio. Later, she became the first woman appointed to a federal appeals judgeship. This next one I really want to showcase, Soledad Chacon. She was elected Secretary of State in New Mexico, and she was the first Latina and first woman of color to hold a statewide elective executive office. Now, when I went to look up, there wasn't a whole lot about her that I could find. So her wiki is actually pretty small, but she also, during her time, served as acting governor of New Mexico for 2 weeks in 1924, while the governor was out of town. Where did he go? He was at like the
somewhere out of state.
He was at the convention, I believe. I'm trying to find it. Yes, the Democratic National Convention in New York City. So while he was at the DNC, she was the acting governor because the lieutenant governor had died that previous year, and being being Secretary of State means that she would be the acting governor because that is the next in line.
That's not necessarily true in every state.
Well, in New Mexico, that's how it works.
Right. I just wanted to point that out.
And in 1934, she was elected to New Mexico's House of Representatives, becoming the fourth Hispanic woman to hold that office. And she served on, several committees, including the chair of Rules and Orders of Business. And unfortunately, she did die at the age of 46 due to peritonitis. Which I'm just reading about what that is, and that just sounds awful. What an awful way to go.
Like a bleeding ulcer kind of thing?
Inflammation of the peritoneum, the lining of the inner wall of the abdomen and cover of the abdominal organs. Ugh. So I found that really, really cool because she is essentially the first woman of color to hold any office. And she was Hispanic, which was really, really cool. The first woman to be elected leader of a U.S. municipality with a population exceeding 10,000 was Emma J. Harvitt, also in 1923. In 1924, we have Cora Bell Reynolds Anderson, elected to Michigan State House of Representatives, the first Native American woman in a state legislature. Another one that I wanted to kind of highlight because that's, kind of a big deal. Her wiki stuff is also very small. Trying to find. Oh, there's just not a lot. There's not a lot about her, and it's really that's really sad. That's very upsetting. There's not a lot about her. So she was a member of the Ojibwa tribe, and so there's a really cool on nps.gov. NPS, yes, National Park Service.gov. So while she was in office, she was appointed the chair of the committee overseeing the industrial home for girls and sat on the committee for agriculture, insurance, and the Northern State Normal School, now Northern Michigan University. She continued promoting public health. She fought against alcoholism and tuberculosis, and she also championed the fight to recognize Native American fishing rights on Huron Bay. So, after her government service, she became active with the Michigan Grange, serving as the representative for the Upper Peninsula. So she died in 1950, and her burial location is actually unknown. But yeah, one of the first Native American women to hold office. Also in 1924, Bertha K. Lands, Republican City Council president at the time, became acting mayor of Seattle, the first woman to lead a major American city. 2 years later, she was elected mayor in her own right in a campaign run by women. Lena Springs of South Carolina chaired the Credentials Committee at the Democratic National Convention and received several votes for the vice presidential nomination. What is the Credentials Committee? What is that? Do you even know?
I'm going to speculate that it's a committee that approves that you're worthy of the office you're running for. I don't know that they do it anymore. It's probably now like a background committee.
Gotcha. In 1925, Nellie Taylor Ross, Wyoming Democrat, became the nation's first woman governor, elected to replace her deceased husband. She served for 2 years. Later, she became vice chair of the Democratic National Committee and director of the U.S. Mint. At the 1928 Democratic National Convention, she received 31 votes on the first ballot for vice president. And that was before, when did they change to where vice president started running with the president on? Because so what we have now when it comes to voting is you have your president and your vice president on the same ticket running together. But back then, you actually voted separately for the vice president. You didn't vote for, and I want to say that was actually a recent history, like 60s, 70s maybe? Or was it a little bit earlier than that? where they don't actually vote. They don't actually run on the same ticket. They actually run separately. So you could have a vice president who was a different party from the president.
Right. Originally, the president was the one who won the election, and the vice president was the one who came in second place.
Interesting.
Yes. And I believe it was the 12th Amendment, 1804, when Thomas Jefferson was reelected and George Clinton became the first vice president in that particular change to the way president and vice president is voted for.
So it was what, 1804?
1804.
Where, hold up, is the change of when they're running on the same ticket?
Yeah, 12th Amendment.
Okay, so then in the 20s, what we're having is people voting. Well, then why are they voting for the vice president? If the vice president is supposed to be on the same ticket.
Right. The 12th Amendment says electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves.
I don't know what any of that means.
That means that you're going to vote for president and vice president with the same vote, and they can't be from the same state.
Interesting. Huh. Well, in 1925, Texas Governor Pat Neff faced a dilemma. A fraternal organization had a case before the Texas Supreme Court, but all the justices and nearly every eligible judge and lawyer in the state were members of the organization and were required to recuse themselves. So his solution was to seat a special session of an all-woman Texas Supreme Court consisting of Hortense Sparks Ward, Ruth Virginia Brazel, and Haiti Lee Hennenberg. It remains the only all-woman state Supreme Court in history. I actually would like to know more about what the heck that was in 1925. Anyway, do you know?
What state was that again?
Texas.
Oh, okay.
I have a feeling I know what it was, but I'm not going to speculate. There was a fraternal organization had a case before the Texas Supreme Court. So moving on, also in 1925, Representative May Ella Nolan became the first woman to chair a congressional committee when, during the 68th Congress, she chaired the Committee on Expenditures in the Post Office Department. In 1928, with her appointment to the West Virginia State House of Representatives, Minnie Buckingham Harper became the first Black woman in a state legislature. So she was elected to the legislature in 1926. They unanimously actually recommended her to replace her predecessor when he died. It was her husband's term. And her appointment reflected both the growing importance of women in American politics and the large voting bloc of African Americans in southwestern Virginia, in southern West Virginia. She served on the House Committee on Federal Relations, Railroads, and Labor, and she chose not to run for election after that. It would take 22 years before an African American woman would be elected to the legislature again. Elizabeth Drury was elected to the House in 1950. Now, this is West Virginia, like the state. This isn't federal. This is on the state level, but it's still huge. She actually died at the age of 91.
Do you know why there's a West Virginia?
No, I do not.
West Virginia is a part of Virginia that stayed with the Union during the Civil War.
I totally knew that. I remember that fact now that you say it. Yes, I knew it had something about, yeah. In 1930, two Latinas, Fidelina Lucero Gallegos and Porfiria Hidalga Saez, were elected to the New Mexico House of Representatives, the first Latina state legislatures. New Mexico is kind of forward thinking when it comes to that. Haiti Wyatt Caraway, appointed in 1931 to fill a vacancy caused by her husband's death. Okay, so I have a question. Why? That's not how it works now, obviously. But why back then did the women fill their husbands' positions?
Because there is a certain belief that they will carry forward their husband's agenda. For example, when Sonny Bono died in the House of Representatives, his wife was appointed to take his seat.
That's a recent history. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I believe she won re-election 1 or 2 times.
Wow.
After that. What's her name? The lady in Arizona that got shot. I believe her last name is Giffords.
I don't remember.
I thought her husband ran for her seat after that.
I find that interesting. I find that very interesting. She ran for a full term and became the first woman elected to the Senate, where she served 2 full terms, and she was the first woman to chair a Senate committee, the Committee on Enrolled Bills, a minor post. But this was the first woman senator in 1932.
Yeah, that was during the Depression.
Yeah. 1933, Ruth Bryan Owen, a former congresswoman, became the first woman to hold a major diplomatic post when she was appointed by President Roosevelt as minister to Denmark. She held that post until 1936, when her marriage to a Dane and resulting dual citizenship made her ineligible to serve. Minnie Davenport Craig became the first woman to hold the position of Speaker of the House in a state legislature. And with her appointment by President Franklin D. Roosevelt as Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins became the first woman ever to serve in a presidential cabinet, and she served until 1945.
Right, which was the year FDR died.
1938, Crystal Dreda Bird Fawcett, what a name, was elected to the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives, the first Black woman elected to a state legislature in 1938. 1948, Margaret Chase Smith became the first woman elected to the Senate without having first been appointed to serve. Smith had first come to Congress when elected to fill her deceased husband's House seat. She went on to be elected to the Senate in her own right. With her election to the Senate, Smith also became the first woman to serve in both houses of Congress. That's pretty badass right there. 1949, Representative Chase G. Woodhouse was the first woman to hold the position of secretary in the House Democratic Caucus. And Bernita Matthews was appointed by President Harry Truman to serve on the U.S. Court for the District of Columbia, making her the first woman to serve as a federal district court judge. So Kamala Harris was actually not the first Black woman nominee for vice president.
No.
Charlotta Spears Bass was the first Black woman nominee for vice president in the United States. And she ran on the Progressive Party ticket, which received less than 1% of the popular vote in 1952 presidential election. And in 1962, I'm starting to skip some of these because like some of these are Patsy Takemoto Mink became the first Asian Pacific Islander woman elected to a state legislature, where she won a seat in the Hawaii Senate. Justice Lorna Lockwood in 1963, first woman elected to the Arizona Supreme Court, became the first woman in the U.S. to serve as Chief Justice of a state Supreme Court. So in 1965, Patsy Mink again, from Hawaii, became the first woman of color and the first woman of Asian Pacific Islander descent in the U.S. House of Representatives. And she served until 1977 and was reelected in 1990. This next one is a huge one. Shirley Chisholm she became the first Black woman to serve in Congress, and she remained in the House of Representatives until 1982. And this lady has a bad history. Okay, so while in Congress, she was dubbed Fighting Shirley and introduced more than 50 pieces of legislation and championed racial and gender equality, helping the poor and ending the Vietnam War. She became the first Black woman and second woman ever to serve on the House Rules Committee. Side note, the Rules Committee has two broad categories, and this is straight from the government website. They have two broad categories of jurisdiction: special orders for the consideration of legislation, known as special rules or rules, and original jurisdiction matters. A special rule provides the terms and conditions of debate on a measure or matter, consideration of which constitutes the bulk of the work of the Rules Committee. Can you kind of go into depth a little bit more on that? Anyway, the committee has the authority to do virtually anything during the course of consideration of a measure, including deeming it passed. The committee can also include a self-executed amendment, which could rewrite just parts of a bill or the entire measure. In essence, so long as majority of the House is willing to vote for a special rule, there's little that the Rules Committee cannot do. So I'm going to actually link this awesome on Women's History Museum, womenshistory.org. This is linking in the, it will also be in our, in the outline later, but about Shirley Chisholm and all of the work that she did. She's from Brooklyn, New York. And she actually started as a nursery school teacher. And she earned a master's from Columbia University. She's just done so much. She's just done so much. In 1972, she actually ran for president in the Democratic primaries. At the party's national convention, she garnered 151.25 delegate votes before Senator George McGovern clinched the nomination. At the same convention, Frances Sissy Farenthold, a former Texas legislator who twice ran for governor of that state, finished second in the ballot for the vice presidential nomination, receiving more than 400 votes. Jean Westwood was the first woman to chair the Democratic National Committee. She was appointed by George McGovern, and she served until just after the election when she was replaced by Robert Strauss. I found this one really cool. In 1973, Yvonne Braithwaite Burke became the first woman to give birth while serving in Congress. That's dope. And Lelia Foley Davis was elected mayor of Taft, Oklahoma, making her the nation's first elected Black woman mayor. This was in 1973. So this was post-Civil War or civil rights. Even though we're still kind of in civil rights, you know.
Totally we are. New Jim Crow laws are coming through.
Maybe we should make that our next podcast. In 1974, Elaine Noble became the first openly lesbian or gay candidate elected to a state legislature, and she served in the Massachusetts House of Representatives for 2 terms starting in January 1975. And Kathy Kazachenko became the first openly gay or lesbian candidate to run successfully for political office in the United States, winning a seat on the Ann Arbor, Michigan City Council. March Fong Yu it was elected California's Secretary of State in 1975 and the first Asian Pacific Islander to hold a statewide elected executive office, which is really cool. The first Arab American woman elected to Congress was Mary Rose Okar, a Democrat in Ohio. She was elected in 1976. So I love all these people who, is that Omar? Ilhan Omar? Is that how you say your name?
I believe that's how you say it. I could be wrong.
But they're, she's not the first. It's not that far from our history. Why? I don't understand why it's so, I don't know. Change. People just don't like change.
People fear change.
Yeah.
They fear losing their power.
Yep. So there are some more really amazing ladies, but due to time constraints, I'm going to kind of fast forward. In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman to ever sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. You probably know a little bit about her.
Oh, yeah. Nominated by all people by Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
She served a long time, too.
Yep.
Generally ruled on the conservative side, of course.
I'm trying to figure out like which ones kind of, because I want to promote all of these amazing women, but at the same time, like we only have so much time.
You have 1980, Geraldine Ferraro. First, I believe, female vice president on a major party ticket. Unfortunately, she ran with Walter Mondale, and
that name is not here for 1980. However, in 1980, LaDonna Harris appears to be the first Native American woman nominee for vice president in the U.S., and she ran on the Citizens Party ticket, which received less than 1% of the popular vote in the 1980 presidential election. Who? Geraldine what?
Geraldine Ferraro.
Okay, I have her in 1984. Third-term Congresswoman Geraldine Ferraro, Secretary of the House Democratic Congress. became the first woman ever to run on a major party's national ticket when she was selected by Walter F. Mondale as his vice presidential running mate. The ticket was decisively defeated, capturing only 13 electoral votes, and few analysts felt that Ferraro's presence had a strong impact, positive or negative, on the outcome. Interesting.
Yeah, because people didn't like Mondale. I was 4 years off. I wasn't able to vote in that election. I was too young.
So Emma Wong Ma appears to be the first Asian American woman nominee for vice president in the U.S., and she ran on the Peace and Freedom Party ticket as running mate to Sonia Johnson. Together, they received less than 1% of the popular votes. Wow. 1986, Barbara Ann Mikulski, a Maryland Democrat, became the first Democratic woman elected to the Senate without previously filling an unexpired congressional term. Combining her Senate service from 1987 to 2017 with her service in the U.S. House of Representatives from 77 to 87, she is the longest serving woman in the history of Congress. Wow. Lottie Shackelford was elected mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas, the first Black woman elected mayor of one of the 100 largest cities in the U.S. in 1987.
You know who else is from Little Rock? Clintons.
Oh, that's right. Kay Orr, a Republican from Nebraska, was the first Republican woman elected governor of a state, as well as the first woman to defeat another woman in a gubernatorial race. So that was in 1987 as well. So that means 2 women were running for the governorship. That's pretty cool. I don't know how to say her name. Aliana Ross Leitonen, a Florida Republican, became the first Hispanic woman and first Cuban American to be elected to Congress. She was elected in August 1989 in a special election and continues to serve. That's pretty cool. In 1991, Barbara Kennelly became the first woman to hold the position of House Democratic Chief Deputy Whip. You want to explain what a whip is?
A whip is the member of the congressional leadership that goes around to make sure they have the votes for legislation that comes up. And
so they whip everybody into shape.
If they don't have the votes, that's exactly what they do.
Gotcha. So this next one is another really big one. In 1992, Althea Garrison was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives, becoming the first transgender or transsexual person to serve in a state legislature in the United States. However, she was outed against her wishes after being elected. She later served as an at-large member of the Boston City Council from January 2019 to January 2020 due to a vacancy left by Ayanna Pressley's election to the U.S. House of Representatives. So she is still doing stuff. She was actually born in Hira, Georgia. Wow. And she moved to Boston to attend beauty school, but went to enroll in junior college and received an associate degree there. She later received a BS degree in administration from Suffolk University and a master's in management from Lesley College and a certificate in special studies in administration and management from Harvard University. According to Suffolk County Probate Court, Garrison petitioned for a name change to Althea in 1976. The petition stated that the name Althea Garrison is consistent with petitioner's appearance and medical condition and is the name by which he will be known in the future. Besides her one term in the Massachusetts House, Garrison has worked as a clerk in human resources for Massachusetts State Controller's Office, where she used her vacation time to run for office. She served for 4 years on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. So that's a name that kind of like when I read it, I was like, that name sounds familiar. And looking more in depth, I'm like, that's why the name sounds familiar. She's actually still active. Carol Moseley Braun, an Illinois Democrat, became the first Black woman and first woman of color in 1992 to be elected to the U.S. Senate. She has also been the first Black woman to win a major party Senate nomination, and she defeated the incumbent in the primary and won the resulting open seat in the general election. Her term ended in 1999 when she lost her re-election bid. Janet Reno, which, I remember that name. But she was the first woman to serve as U.S. Attorney General. And she served under President Clinton, served in his cabinet from 93 to 2001. And she ran unsuccessfully for governor in the 2002 Florida Democratic primary. Yes, Madeleine Albright in 1997, Madeleine K. Albright became the first woman to serve as U.S. Secretary of State, serving from 1997 to 2001. She became the highest ranking woman in the U.S. government, but as a naturalized citizen, she would not have been eligible to become president. She had previously served as a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations from 93 to 97. In the same year, Ada Alvarez became the first Hispanic woman, as well as the first person of Puerto Rican heritage to hold a cabinet-level position when she was appointed administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration in the Clinton administration. That's a lot of administration in there. Tammy Baldwin, in 1998, a Democrat from Wisconsin, became the first openly gay or lesbian person elected to Congress as a non-incumbent. She was also Wisconsin's first woman in Congress. And in 2012, she became the first openly gay or lesbian person elected to the U.S. Senate. In 2001, we have a lot of ladies in 2001. So we're going to go through them one at a time. Representative Nita Lowey became the first woman chair to chair the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. She also served as House Minority Whip at large. Heather Fargo was elected mayor of Sacramento, California, the first Latina elected mayor of one of the 100 largest cities in the U.S. Sila Calderon, former mayor of San Juan, became the first woman governor of Puerto Rico. Hillary Clinton became the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from New York, the only first lady ever elected to public office, and she won an open seat in a general election. Condoleezza Rice became the first woman to hold the post of National Security Advisor, formerly known as Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, when she was appointed by President George W. Bush. Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, and who is actually currently under investigation for lots of things, including benefiting her family's shipment company, became the first Asian American woman to serve in a presidential cabinet when she was appointed Secretary of Labor by President Bush. Gail Norton became the first woman to serve as Secretary of the Interior appointed by President George Bush. Norton was the first woman elected as Colorado's Attorney General and served that position for 2 terms. Ann Venman was appointed by President Bush to be the first female Secretary of Agriculture. She had previously been the first woman to serve as Secretary of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Christine Todd Whitman of New Jersey became the first female former governor to serve in a presidential cabinet level position when she was appointed administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency by President Bush. She had been the first woman elected governor in New Jersey and served 2 terms in that position. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson became the first woman to serve as vice chair of the Senate Republican Committee. Senator Patty Murray became the first woman to serve as chair of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And Representative Nancy Pelosi was elected by her colleagues as House Democratic Whip, the highest-ranking woman in the history of the U.S. Congress. All in 2001. That was a lot. And that is something I did not expect to come out of the George H.W. Bush era. So that's actually kind of cool. In 2002, the next year, though, Pelosi became the first woman to head her party in Congress when she was elected by her colleagues as House Democratic leader. In 2005, Condoleezza Rice became the first Republican woman and the first Black woman to serve as U.S. Secretary of State. In 2007, Pelosi again became the first woman to serve as Speaker of the House of the U.S. House. In 2008, Senator Clinton was the first woman to win a major party's presidential primary for the purposes of delegate selection when she won the primary in New Hampshire on January 8th. She also became the first woman to be a presidential candidate in every primary and caucus in every state. Sarah Palin, the Alaska governor, selected by John McCain as his vice presidential running mate, became the first woman on a national GOP ticket. Meh. All right, we're going to actually kind of skip the most recent history. And we're going to bump up to 2016. In 2016, Kamala Harris, who is both Black and South Asian, became the first South Asian and second Black woman elected to the U.S. Senate. And Hillary Rodham Clinton became the first woman to be a major party's presumptive nominee for president. She formally became the first woman to be a major party's presidential nominee at the Democratic National Convention on July 26, 2016. Despite winning the popular vote by almost 3 million votes, Clinton lost the Electoral College and conceded the general election on November 9th, 2016. 2017, Elizabeth Warren became the first woman to serve as vice chair of the Senate Democratic Conference. So, also in 2017, which is so awesome, 25 years after Althea Garrison's election and non-consensual outing, Danica Roem became the first openly transgender person to be elected and to serve in a state legislature in the United States. This is the most recent history. Y'all, we started in 1848, and in 2017, we're still making these milestones. And that means that we have so much more left to go. 2018, you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, I'm not sure how to say her name, I'm sorry, became the first Muslim women elected to Congress. Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland became the first Native American women elected to Congress, which is huge. And of course, Kamala Harris in 2020 became the first U.S. vice president. And to this date, the most recent, which was confirmed this week, 2021, Deb Haaland was appointed by President Joe Biden to serve as Secretary of the Interior, becoming the first Native American person, not just woman, but first Native American person to serve in a presidential cabinet. Not only that, what she is in charge of is specifically her people. And I'll let Ron kind of explain that a little bit. Secretary of Interior.
Well, the Secretary of Interior sets policy and rules on different measures for all the federal lands in the United States. Under the Secretary of the Interior is also the BIA, which is called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which oversees all the reservations in the land, even though they're supposed to be semi-autonomous.
Yeah. But previous to Deb Haaland, it's always been a white man in charge of that.
I believe it's always been a white man. I don't recall any women ever having the post. I could be wrong.
But she is, the fact that this is so major, like 1848 to 2021. How many years is that, Mr. Math? What is that?
169.
169 years. In 169 years.
163. Sorry.
Okay, 163 years. In 163 years. That's where we're at with women in history. And there's so much more. And I will link to all of those amazing milestones. But that's it. That is this podcast. I just wanted to share.
173. Sorry.
Oh my God. Could you make up your mind on math? How many years? Yeah. How many years?
173.
173 years.
And I think you left out an important first.
What?
Justice Sotomayor. First Hispanic on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Where, lady?
Yeah, she's a lady.
What year?
Let's see. She was.
It could have been one of the. I was trying to, because we're in.
Yeah, 2009.
Okay, so I was skipping a lot of the 2000 stuff. There it is, Sonia Sotomayor. Yep, I totally skipped 2009. I went from 2008 to 2016 essentially. But yeah, there is a lot. I mean, these are women who, I mean, we've made more strides in recent history, obviously, because of how many people that I was able to name in, like, you've got 2 to 3 or more in the 2000s. But the fact that not a lot that just, to me, we still have so much to go. And the fact that we're still making these milestones, this 173 years later, like, why don't we have any Black women and women of color on the Supreme Court justice as Supreme Court justices? Why don't we have more? They're a huge part of our country. It's mostly white dudes. One Black guy, mostly white dudes, and, you know, like, what, 2 women? Not even 2 women now?
2 women.
Yeah, like, why is it not? We should have...
Actually, 3 women.
We should have an even split in the justice. We should have... We need more women. We need more women on, you know, Supreme Court justice as a Supreme Court justice. But not just that, like, we need to do better. When it comes, we've done so much, but we can't stop here. We cannot stop. So thank you so much for this special, for hanging out for this special podcast of Women's History Month, where I just tell you about these amazing women. You can go read about these people. You can read, you can find out about them. It's all of the information is out there. And I highly recommend learning more and finding, you know, just go learn more about these women and about our history, about our country's history. We'll be back next week, you know, talking about basic law and stuff like that. If you have any subjects that you want us to cover, please let us know what you want us to talk about. We like your questions.
Some of the discussion next week will be, you got an idea, you want to make it a law? We'll show you how to do that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about like how you actually make a law happen. But thank you so much for listening. This was definitely a special episode. But I appreciate you all listening to Learning the Law. If you like this podcast and you want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow in all your favorite places, and share it. And you can find it hosted live here on Twitch at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy. And you can use the hashtag Learning the Law on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all social medias to follow more there. You can find Ron on Twitter at NecroKijo. And you can find me on any social media platform at Phoenix Nymphy. If you have any questions, please tweet, comments, or email us at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com. This has been a Two Lazy Dogs production.
Bye, everyone.